The air in the funeral parlor was thick with the scent of lilies and regret, but all I could smell was betrayal. My name is Emily Harper, and I was 27 when my grandfather's wake became the stage for my family's final act of cruelty. They branded me worthless that day, their words slicing deeper than any knife could. I stood in the corner of the room, clutching the edge of my black dress, the one I'd bought secondhand, because I couldn't afford anything else. My cousins, draped in designer morning attire, whispered and pointed, their eyes glinting with something that wasn't grief. My parents, rigid and cold, didn't even glance my way. I was the outcast, the disappointment, the one who'd never measure up. And yet, in that moment of utter rejection, I had no idea that my grandfather's attorney was about to turn their world upside down and hand me the keys to an empire I didn't even know existed. I grew up in a family where love was a currency, doled out sparingly and only to those who earned it. My grandfather, William Harper, was the exception, a man whose warmth felt like sunlight after a storm. He built Harper Industries, a sprawling conglomerate that dealt in everything from real estate to tech innovation, from nothing but a small hardware store and a dream. To the world, he was a titan, but to me, he was just Grandpa. Telling me stories about constellations, on his porch slipping me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking, and always believing I could be more than what my family saw. My parents, though, had other priorities. My older sister, Claire, was their golden child, the one they pinned their hopes on. She was polished, poised, always saying the right thing at the right time. I was the clumsy one, the dreamer, the girl who'd rather sketch in a notebook than network at their fancy galas. By the time I was a teenager, I'd learned to stay quiet, to shrink myself, so I wouldn't draw their disapproval. But shrinking didn't save me. The unfairness started early, little cuts that added up over the years. When Claire wanted piano lessons, they hired the best tutor in the state. When I asked for art supplies, I got a lecture about practicality. Claire's college fund was a bottomless well. Mine was a piggy bank they never bothered to fill. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through a local community college, studying graphic design, because it was the only thing that made my heart sing. Meanwhile, Claire breezed through an Ivy League school, her tuition paid without a second thought. I didn't mind, not really, at least that's what I told myself. I loved my sister, and I wanted her to shine. But every time my parents praised her, it came with a barb aimed at me. Why can't you be more like Claire? My mother would sigh, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. You're wasting your potential, Emily. Grandpa was my refuge. He'd call me his little artist, framing my childish drawings like they were masterpieces. When I was 16, he gave me a leather-bound sketchbook, its pages thick and creamy, the kind I'd never have afforded myself. "This is for your dreams," he said, his eyes crinkling. "Don't let anyone tell you they're not worth chasing." I clung to those words even as my family's disdain grew louder. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I was living in a cramped studio apartment, freelancing as a graphic designer for small businesses, barely scraping by. Claire, on the other hand, was engaged to a hedge fund manager, planning a wedding that cost more than my entire yearly income. My parents beamed with pride, while I was an afterthought, invited to family events only out of obligation. When Grandpa got sick, everything changed. He was diagnosed with cancer when I was 26, and the family rallied not out of love, but out of greed. I visited him every week, sitting by his hospital bed, sketching while he told me stories about his early days building Harper Industries. My cousins, who'd barely called him in years, suddenly swarmed, asking about his will, his assets, his plans. Claire was the worst, dropping by with her fiancé to check in, but I saw the way her eyes darted to his, safe the way she pressed him about the company. I didn't care about his money, I just wanted him to keep telling me stories. But I wasn't blind. I knew they were circling like vultures, and it broke my heart. The day of the wake, I was already raw. Grandpa had passed 2 weeks earlier, and I'd spent every night since crying myself. To sleep clutching that old sketchbook he'd given me, I arrived at the funeral parlor early, hoping to say my goodbyes in peace, but my family was already there, filling the room with their performative grief. Claire stood at the center, tears perfectly, staged her fiancé's arm around her. My cousins Mark and Lila were nearby, sipping coffee and laughing about some private joke. My parents greeted guests, their faces masks of solemnity. No one acknowledged me, not even when I placed a single white rose Grandpa's favorite on his casket. Then it started. Mark was the first to strike, sidling up to me with a smirk. "Still doodling for a living, Emily? Guess you'll never make anything of yourself." Lila joined in, her voice dripping with mock pity. "It's so sad, isn't it? Grandpa always had a soft spot for the lost causes." I bit my lip, trying to hold back tears, but then Claire chimed in, her tone cutting. "Honestly, Emily, you could have at least dressed better for this. You look like you're here to clean the place." The room erupted in soft laughter, and my parents didn't say a word to defend me. My mother just shook her head, muttering, "Always an embarrassment." I wanted to disappear. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood there frozen, my hands trembling as I gripped my sketchbook, the one thing tethering me to Grandpa's love. Their words echoed every doubt I'd ever had that I was nothing, that I'd never be enough. I was about to slip out, to run from the suffocating weight of their judgment, when the door opened and a man in a crisp suit walked in. He was older, with silver hair and a quiet authority that made the room hush. "I'm Richard Ellison," he said, his voice steady. "William Harper's attorney. I'm here to discuss his final wishes." My cousins exchanged eager glances, already counting their inheritance. Claire straightened her smile, calculated. My parents stepped forward, ready to take charge. I stayed in the corner, unnoticed, expecting nothing. Why would I? I was the worthless one, the one they'd written off years ago. But then Mr. Ellison's eyes found mine, and he said something that made the air in the room shift. "Emily Harper," he said, "I need to speak with you. Alone." The silence that followed was deafening. Claire's smile faltered. Mark's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. My mother's face twisted like she'd swallowed something sour. I didn't understand, not yet, but I felt the weight of their stares, the sudden shift in the room's gravity. All I could do was nod, my heart pounding as Mr. Ellison gestured for me to follow him. As we stepped into a small side room, I heard Lila whisper, "What does he want with her?" And for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of something besides pain, curiosity maybe, or the tiniest spark of hope. What had Grandpa done? Why was I the one being called? I had no answers, only the memory of his voice, telling me to chase my dreams. And as I sat down across from Mr. Ellison, I had no idea that my life was about to change forever. The side room was small, barely big enough for the wooden table and 2 chairs that filled it. The walls were a dull beige, and the single window let in a sliver of gray light, making the space feel like a confession booth. I sat across from Mr. Ellison, my hands still clutching that worn sketchbook, its edges frayed from years of use. My heart was a drumbeat in my chest, loud and erratic, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong here, not in this room, not in this moment. The weight of my family's words from the wake clung to me like damp cloth, worthless embarrassment, lost cause. Yet here I was, singled out by Grandpa's attorney, a man whose calm demeanor seemed to hold secrets I wasn't ready to hear. Mr. Ellison adjusted his glasses and opened a leather folder, his movements deliberate. "Emily," he said, his voice low but clear, "your grandfather was very specific about his wishes. He spoke of you often, you know." I blinked, startled. Grandpa had talked about me. To his lawyer, I'd always thought our moments those quiet afternoons, sketching by his bedside, laughing over his terrible hospital coffee, were just ours, private and small. He admired your spirit. Mr. Ellison continued, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Your resilience. He said you reminded him of himself, when he was young, building something from nothing. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I didn't know, I whispered. It was all I could manage. The idea that Grandpa saw me that way, when my own parents couldn't even look at me without disappointment, felt like a lifeline thrown into a storm. But the lifeline came with a weight I wasn't prepared for. Mr. Ellison slid a document across the table, its pages thick and official, stamped with seals and signatures. William Harper named you the sole heir to Harper Industries. He said, his words landing like a thunderclap. The company, its assets, its properties, everything, it's yours. I stared at the document, the words blurring as my vision swam. Harper Industries. A multi-billion-dollar empire that employed thousands owned skyscrapers in 3 countries and funded cutting-edge tech startups. It was the kind of legacy people fought over, the kind of power that defined dynasties. And it was me, Emily Harper, the girl who couldn't afford a new dress for her grandfather's wake. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be real. There must be a mistake, I said, my voice trembling. What about Claire or my cousins? They're the ones who... I trailed off, unable to finish. They're the ones who matter, I wanted to say. The ones my family valued. Mr. Ellison shook his head. No mistake. Your grandfather was adamant. He believed you had the vision to carry his work forward. He also left you a letter. He handed me a sealed envelope, my name written in Grandpa's familiar looping script. My fingers shook as I took it, but I couldn't bring myself to open it, not yet. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Why me? I asked, almost to myself. I'm nobody. I'm just me. You're not nobody to William, Mr. Ellison said firmly. He saw what others didn't. He trusted you to protect his legacy, not just to inherit it. He paused, his eyes softening. But I must warn you, Emily, this won't be easy. Your family, they're expecting a different outcome. They've already contacted my office asking about their shares. When they learn the truth, they won't take it well. I nodded, my stomach twisting. I could already picture Claire's icy glare, my mother's sharp tongue, my cousin's entitled outrage. They'd spent years treating me like I was beneath them, and now I held the one thing they'd all been salivating over. Part of me wanted to run, to hand it all back, and disappear into my tiny apartment where no one could hurt me. But another part, a quieter, fiercer part, stirred. Grandpa had believed in me. He'd seen something I couldn't see in myself. And maybe, just maybe, I owed it to him to try. Mr. Ellison spent the next hour explaining the basics. The company's structure, its board of directors, the legal steps to formalize my ownership. It was overwhelming, a crash course in a world I'd never touched. I'd designed logos for coffee shops, not run empires. But his confidence in me, rooted in Grandpa's faith, kept me from crumbling. When we finally stepped back into the main room, the wake was still in full swing, though the mood had shifted. My family's eyes locked onto me, their curiosity laced with suspicion. Claire approached, her smile tight. What was that about? She asked, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. Just some paperwork, I said, clutching the envelope to my chest. I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. The truth felt too big, too fragile, like a secret that could shatter if I spoke it aloud. Claire raised an eyebrow, but didn't press, distracted by a guest offering condolences. I slipped out of the parlor soon after, the weight of the letter burning in my hands. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened it. Grandpa's words spilled across the page, each one a gift and a challenge. My dearest Emily, you've always been my spark. The world will try to dim you, but you're stronger than you know. This company isn't just money, it's a chance to build something that matters. Trust yourself, I always did. I cried until dawn, not just for him, but for the girl I'd been the one who'd believed she was nothing. His words were a mirror, showing me a version of myself I'd never dared to imagine. But mirrors can be cruel too. I wasn't ready for what came next, the anger, the betrayal, the way my family would turn on me like wolves. The wake had been their opening salvo. The real war was about to begin. The days that followed were a blur of grief and fear. I didn't tell anyone about the inheritance, not even my best friend Mia, who'd been my rock since high school. I needed time to process, to figure out what it meant to be the heir to Harper Industries. I kept freelancing, taking on small design projects to pay my rent, but every spare moment was spent reading about the company. I pored over articles, financial reports, anything I could find online. Harper Industries wasn't just a business, it was a legacy of innovation, from sustainable housing projects to AI-driven medical research. Grandpa had built it to change lives, not just bank accounts. The more I learned, the more I felt his presence, guiding me towards something bigger than myself. But the weight of it was crushing. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, wondering if I could do this. I wasn't Claire with her effortless charm and business degree. I wasn't my cousins who'd grown up schmoozing at country clubs. I was just Emily, the girl who'd been told her dreams were a waste of time. Doubt was a constant companion, whispering that I'd fail, that I'd prove my family right. And then there was the fear of their reaction. Mr. Ellison had warned me they'd fight, and I knew he was right. My family didn't just want the company, they felt entitled to it. To them, I was an obstacle, a glitch in their perfect plan. A week after the wake, the first crack appeared. My mother called, her voice clipped and cold. "Emily, we need to talk about your grandfather's estate. Claire says you met with his lawyer. What did he tell you?" I froze, my phone slippery in my hand. I mumbled something vague about details to sort out, but she wasn't fooled. "Don't play games," she snapped. "This family deserves to know what's going on." The word family stung because I'd never been included in it, not really. I hung up my chest tight, knowing the storm was coming. The next day, I got a text from Claire. "We're meeting at Mom and Dad's tomorrow. Be there. We need to discuss Grandpa's will." It wasn't a request, it was a summons. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to hide from their inevitable fury. But Grandpa's letter was on my nightstand. His words burned into my heart. Trust yourself. I couldn't run forever. I had to face them, not as the girl they dismissed, but as the woman Grandpa believed I could be. The meeting was set for 7 p.m. at my parents' sprawling estate, a place I'd always felt like a guest and never a daughter. I spent the day preparing, rereading Grandpa's letter, skimming company reports, trying to arm myself with knowledge. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew it wouldn't be kind. As I drove to their house, the sky was heavy with clouds, the air thick with the promise of rain. I parked in the driveway, my old hatchback dwarfed by Claire's sleek Mercedes and my cousin's SUVs. I took a deep breath, clutching my sketchbook like a shield, and stepped inside. The living room was a battlefield before I even sat down. My parents, Claire, Mark, and Lila, were already there, their faces a mix of impatience and disdain. My mother didn't offer me a drink or a seat. She just gestured to a chair like I was a stranger. "Let's make this quick," she said, her voice ice. "What did the lawyer tell you, Emily, and don't lie?" Claire leaned forward, her eyes narrowed, while Mark smirked like he was watching a show. Lila tapped her nails on the table, her boredom a deliberate slight. I opened my mouth, but the words caught in my throat. "How do you tell people who've spent your whole life tearing you down that you've just inherited everything they wanted?" Before I could speak, Claire cut in. "Look, we all know. Grandpa was sentimental about you, but let's be real. You can't handle his company. You're not equipped." Her tone was patronizing, like she was explaining something to a child. "We're prepared to take it off your hands. You'd just mess it up anyway." My cousins nodded, and my father added, "It's for the best, Emily. You don't want that kind of responsibility." Their certainty, their assumption that I'd just roll over lit a spark in me. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt angry. "I'm not giving anything up." I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The room went still. My mother's eyes widened and Claire's mouth opened, then closed. Mark laughed, but it was nervous, uncertain. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. I took a breath, Grandpa's letter echoing in my mind, and said the words I'd been too scared to voice. "Grandpa left everything to me. Harper Industries, the properties, all of it. I'm the sole heir." The silence was electric, charged with shock and fury. Then Claire exploded. "That's impossible. You're lying." My mother's face was white, her hands trembling. "This is a mistake," she hissed. "You don't deserve this." Mark and Lila started shouting, their voices overlapping, accusing me of manipulating Grandpa, of stealing what was rightfully theirs. My father just stared, his jaw tight, like I'd betrayed him by existing. I stood, my legs shaking, but my resolve firm. "It's not a mistake," I said, "and I'm not giving it up." I left them there, their voices rising behind me, and drove home through the rain, my heart pounding with fear and something new, defiance. I wasn't ready to run an empire, but I was done running from them. Grandpa had given me a chance, not just to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right, and I was going to take it no matter how much it scared me. Have you ever been underestimated like that? Felt like the world decided who you were before you could? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Let's talk about how we rise above. The rain followed me home that night, a relentless drumming on my car's roof that matched the chaos in my head. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, as I replayed the scene at my parents' house. Their faces, Claire's fury, my mother's disbelief. My father's cold silence burned in my mind. I'd said the words claimed Grandpa's legacy out loud, but now what I was? Emily Harper, a freelancer who could barely pay her electric bill, not some corporate titan. Harper Industries was a colossus, and I was a speck, standing in its shadow, with nothing but a letter and a sketchbook to guide me. As I pulled into my apartment complex, the weight of it all pressed down, threatening to crush the defiance I'd felt an hour ago. But Grandpa's words tucked in that envelope on my passenger seat kept me anchored. "Trust yourself." I had to try, even if I didn't know how. Inside my tiny apartment, I sank onto the couch, the springs creaking under me. The place was a mess. Sketchpads scattered on the coffee table, dishes piled in the sink, a thrift store lamp flickering in the corner. It was a far cry from the gleaming boardrooms of Harper Industries, and the contrast made my stomach churn. How was I supposed to do this? I didn't have an MBA or a trust fund or even a decent suit. My family's voices echoed in my head. "You're not equipped. You'll mess it up. You don't deserve this." For a moment, I believed them. I curled up, hugging my knees, and let the tears come hot and heavy until my chest ached. That's when Mia called. Mia Delgado. My best friend since we were 16, had a knack for knowing when I was falling apart. She was a nurse, tough as nails, but soft where it counted, with a laugh that could light up a room. What's wrong?" she said the second I picked up her voice, cutting through my haze. I hadn't told her about the inheritance, hadn't told anyone, but the words spilled out now. A jumbled mess of the wake, the lawyer, the meeting, and my family's rage. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she let out a low whistle. "Holy crap, Em. You're like a billionaire now. I'm not anything I said." My voice raw. "I'm just scared." "They're right, Mia. I can't do this. I don't know the first thing about running a company." She snorted, and I could picture her, rolling her eyes, her dark curls bouncing. "Screw them," she said. "Your grandpa didn't pick you by accident. He knew you could handle it. And you're not doing this alone, okay? You've got me, and I'm not letting you drown." Her certainty was a lifeline, and for the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe. Mia showed up the next morning with coffee and a plan. "Step 1, she said, plopping onto my couch. "You need to stop hiding. Step 2, we figure out what you're walking into." She'd already Googled Harper Industries, pulling up articles and bios of its executives. "These people are gonna test you," she warned, pointing to a photo of the board of directors. A dozen stern faces in tailored suits. "They'll think you're some kid who got lucky. You need to show them you're serious." I nodded, my stomach twisting, but her no-nonsense attitude was contagious. We spent the day researching, making lists, and strategizing. Mia even dragged me to a department store to buy a blazer. "You gotta look the part, Em," and though I cringed at the price, I let her talk me into it. The next week was a crash course in survival. Mr. Ellison arranged a meeting with the board set for 10 days after the wake to formally announce my role. Until then, I was in limbo, preparing for a world I barely understood. I met with Mr. Ellison daily, soaking up everything he could teach me about the company's operations. He was patient, breaking down complex terms like equity stakes and supply chain logistics until they made sense. He also gave me access to Grandpa's personal files, decades of notes contracts, and vision statements. Reading them felt like hearing his voice again, steady and sure, guiding me through the fog. But the emotional fallout was harder to navigate. My family didn't let up. Claire texted me daily, her messages a mix of cajoling and threats. "Let's talk this out, Em. You don't want to ruin everything. You're being selfish. Think about the family." My mother called, her voice dripping with guilt. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you," I wanted to laugh at that. What had they ever done but make me feel small? But each call chipped away at me, stirring up old wounds. My cousins were worse, posting vague, snarky comments on social media about undeserving heirs and family betrayals. I stopped checking my phone, but the hurt lingered, a bruise I couldn't ignore. Mia was my anchor, but it was someone else who gave me the push I needed. One afternoon, while sorting through Grandpa's files, I found a photo tucked inside a folder. A younger me, maybe 10, grinning beside a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, my high school art teacher, who'd seen something in my messy sketches and encouraged me to keep going. She'd passed away a few years ago, but her belief in me had been a spark, just like Grandpa's. On impulse, I drove to my old high school, needing to feel that spark again. The art room was still there, smelling of paint and possibility. The new teacher, a young woman named Ms. Patel, let me wander, and as I traced the walls lined with student work, I remembered Mrs. Carter's words. "Your art is your voice, Emily. Don't let anyone silence it." Standing there, I realized something. Harper Industries wasn't just a company. It was Grandpa's art, his voice. He'd trusted me to carry it forward, not because I was perfect, but because I understood what it meant to create something from nothing. I wasn't ready, but I didn't have to be. I just had to start. That night, I sketched for the first time in weeks, filling pages with ideas, not just designs, but visions for the company. Sustainable projects, community initiatives, ways to make Harper Industries a force for good. It felt like a conversation with Grandpa, and it gave me strength. The day of the board meeting arrived like a storm. I woke up nauseous, my hands shaking, as I pulled on the blazer Mia had picked out. Mr. Ellison met me at the Harper Industries headquarters, a sleek glass tower that loomed over the city. "You'll do fine," he said, but his calm didn't ease the knot in my chest. The boardroom was intimidating, all polished wood and floor-to-ceiling windows, with 12 executives staring me down. Most were older men, their expressions ranging from skeptical to outright hostile. The chairman, a gruff man named Mr. Thornton, didn't bother with pleasantries. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice clipped, "your grandfather's decision has surprised us. We'd like to understand your qualifications." I'd prepared for this rehearsed answers with Mia and Mr. Ellison, but their scrutiny made my mind blank. I clutched my sketchbook, its weight grounding me, and took a breath. "I'm not here to pretend I'm something I'm not." I said, my voice wavering at first. "I don't have an MBA or years of corporate experience. But I knew my grandfather and I know what he wanted for this company, to innovate, to uplift, to make a difference. I'm here to learn to listen and to lead with his vision." I opened my sketchbook, showing them my ideas, rough but earnest. This is where I start. The room was quiet, their faces unreadable. Then Ms. Rivera, one of the younger board members, leaned forward. "You've got guts," she said, a hint of approval in her voice. "Let's see what you can do." It wasn't a victory, but it was a crack in the wall, a chance to prove myself. Mr. Thornton grunted, unimpressed, but agreed to a trial period 6 months to show I could handle the role. I left the meeting exhausted, but alive, like I'd survived a battle I hadn't expected to win. That night, Mia took me out for pizza, refusing to let me wallow. "You faced a room full of suits and didn't flinch," she said, raising her soda in a mock toast. "That's my girl." I laughed, but the fear was still there, coiled in my gut. The board was one hurdle. My family was another. They'd called an emergency meeting for the next day, demanding I explain myself. I knew it would be ugly, but I was done shrinking. Grandpa's letter was in my bag, his words a shield. You're stronger than you know. I wasn't just fighting for the company. I was fighting for myself, for the girl who'd been called worthless and believed it for too long. The meeting was at Claire's penthouse, a glittering space that screamed wealth. My family was already there, their faces a mix of anger and calculation. Claire stood by the window, arms crossed, her engagement ring catching the light. My mother sat rigid, her lips a thin line. Mark and Lila lounged on the couch, smirking like they'd already won. My father spoke first, his voice low and dangerous. Emily, this has gone far enough. You need to sign the company over to us. You're not capable, and you know it. I looked at them, really looked, and saw them for what they were: not a family, but a pack united by greed, not love. The hurt was still there, sharp and raw, but it didn't own me anymore. No, I said, my voice clear. Grandpa chose me. I'm not giving it up, and I'm not backing down. Claire laughed, sharp and cruel. You're delusional, she said. You'll crash and burn, and we'll be here to pick up the pieces. My mother chimed in, her voice venomous. You're tearing this family apart. Their words stung, but they didn't break me. I stood taller, my sketchbook in my hands, Grandpa's letter in my heart. You tore this family apart long before I did, I said. You made me feel like nothing, but I'm not nothing. I'm William Harper's granddaughter, and I'm going to prove it. I walked out, their shouts fading behind me, and for the first time I felt free, not from their anger, but from their power over me. Back home, I sat at my desk sketching again, pouring my fear and hope into lines and shapes. The road ahead was daunting: board meetings, corporate politics, a family that would never stop fighting me. But I wasn't alone. I had Mia, Mr. Ellison, Mrs. Carter's memory, and most of all, Grandpa's faith. I wasn't ready, but I was starting, and that was enough. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to make you small? What gave you the strength to keep going? Share your stories below. I'd love to hear them. The weeks after that confrontation at Claire's penthouse felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. I was no longer just Emily, the overlooked daughter, the family's punching bag. I was Emily Harper, heir to Harper Industries, and the weight of that title was both a crown and a cage. Every morning I woke up with my heart racing, Grandpa's letter on my nightstand, like a talisman against the doubt that crept in during the quiet hours. I'd faced my family and the board, but those were just the opening shots. In a war I was only beginning to understand. Harper Industries wasn't just a company. It was a world of power plays, egos, and expectations, and I was a novice stepping into a coliseum. But something had shifted inside me. The girl who'd cowered at her grandfather's wake was still there, but she was quieter now, drowned out by a voice that sounded a lot like Grandpa's, "You're stronger than you know." My days became a whirlwind of learning. Mr. Ellison, bless him, was my guide, setting up meetings with department heads and walking me through the company's sprawling operations. Harper Industries had its hands in everything: renewable energy projects in Europe, affordable housing developments in the Midwest, even a biotech division working on cancer treatments. Grandpa hadn't just built a business, he'd built a legacy of hope, and the thought of carrying it forward both thrilled and terrified me. I spent hours in the company archives reading his old memos, his handwritten notes in the margins of contracts. They were like breadcrumbs leading me to the man he'd been and the leader he believed I could become. But the learning curve was brutal. My first meeting with the renewable energy team was a disaster. I'd prepared memorizing stats about solar panel efficiency, but when a senior engineer grilled me on supply chain logistics, I froze, my words tangling. The room went quiet, and I saw the doubt in their eyes. She's in over her head. I left the meeting humiliated, my blazers sticking to my sweaty back. But Ms. Rivera, the board member who'd given me a chance, caught me in the hall. You don't have to know everything day one. She said, her voice firm but kind. You just have to show up and keep learning. They'll respect that. Her words stuck with me, a reminder that strength wasn't about being perfect. It was about refusing to quit. Mia was my lifeline outside the corporate chaos. She'd come over after her hospital shifts, bringing takeout, and her unfiltered honesty. You're not going to be a CEO overnight, she said one night, sprawled on my couch with a carton of lo mein. But you're not the same Emily who let Claire walk all over her. You've got this. She made me laugh, made me feel human when the pressure felt like it would crush me. She also pushed me to start acting the part. You need to move out of this shoebox, she said, gesturing at my cramped apartment. You're running an empire, Em. Get a place that says it. I resisted. My thrift store life was familiar, safe, but she was right. I couldn't lead from a place that screamed struggle. So I took a leap. With Mr. Ellison's help, I found a sleek condo downtown, close to the Harper Industries tower. It was nothing extravagant, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city that made my heart skip. Signing the lease felt like signing a contract with myself, to stop hiding to claim the space I was meant to occupy. Moving in was bittersweet. I packed up my old life, my second-hand furniture, and stacks of sketch pads, and realized how small I'd kept myself. But as I hung one of my old drawings, a sketch of Grandpa's porch, done when I was 16, on the new walls, I felt a spark of pride. This was my home, my fresh start. Work wasn't the only battle. My family's silence after the penthouse meeting didn't last. They regrouped, their attacks more calculated now. Claire sent me a long email cloaked in fake concern. I'm worried about you, Em. This is too much for you. Let us help manage the company. You can still have a role. It was a trap dressed up as kindness, and I didn't respond. My mother left voicemails, each one sharper. You're being ungrateful, Emily. We raised you, and this is how you repay us. Mark and Lila took to social media, again posting cryptic rants about stolen legacies that their friends liked and shared. The worst was my father, who showed up at my new condo, unannounced, his face a mask of controlled rage. You're making a fool of yourself, he said, standing in my living room like he owned it. Sign the company over, or you'll regret it. I told him to leave, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, and when the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor fighting tears. Their rejection wasn't new, but it hurt just as much. What kept me going was the small wins. A week after the condo move, I pitched an idea to the housing division, a community arts program, tied to their affordable housing projects, inspired by my own love of sketching. I'd spent nights refining it, drawing mock-ups of mural spaces and workshop areas. To my shock, the team loved it, and Ms. Rivera pushed it through to the board. When it was approved, I felt a rush I hadn't known was possible, not just pride, but purpose. I was starting to see the company not as a burden, but as a canvas, a place to paint the kind of world Grandpa had dreamed of. Then came my first real breakthrough. Harper Industries was sponsoring a regional tech conference, and Mr. Ellison suggested I give a short speech to represent the company. Public speaking was my nightmare. I'd always been the quiet one, the one who faded into the background. But I couldn't say no. It was a chance to show the board and myself that I could lead. I spent days writing and rewriting, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror until my voice didn't shake. Mia helped, playing the role of a tough crowd, heckling me until I could laugh it off. Own the room, Em, she said. You're not asking for their approval, you're telling them who you are. The conference was held in a massive convention center, all glass and steel, packed with industry leaders in sharp suits. I wore a tailored dress. Mia had picked out my sketchbook tucked in my bag for courage. Backstage, my palms were sweaty, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might burst. When my name was called, I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding. The crowd was a sea of faces, some curious, some skeptical. I took a breath, picturing Grandpa's smile, and started speaking. My grandfather, William Harper, believed business could be a force for good. I said, my voice stronger than I expected. He built Harper Industries to create, to connect, to change lives. I'm here to carry that vision forward, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. I shared my arts program idea, tying it to Grandpa's legacy of community, and ended with a line from his letter, "Dreams are only impossible until someone dares to chase them." The applause was polite at first, then grew a wave that lifted me. I saw Miss Rivera in the crowd nodding, and even Mr. Thornton, the grumpy chairman, gave a grudging clap. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and it felt like flying. The speech got coverage in a local business journal, a small article that called me an unexpected but promising new voice. Reading it, I cried, not from sadness, but from the realization that I was doing this. I was becoming someone I hadn't known I could be. Mia framed the article, hanging it in my condo with a note, "Told you so." But the high didn't last. The article caught my family's attention, and their attacks escalated. Claire called her voice venomous. "You're embarrassing yourself playing CEO. Stop before you ruin Grandpa's name." My mother sent a letter, handwritten and vicious, accusing me of stealing their future. It hurt, but I didn't let it stop me. I was learning to shield myself, to let their words bounce off the armor I was building. At work, I kept pushing. I enrolled in an online business course, staying up late to study finance and strategy. I met with every division head, asking questions, listening, learning their challenges. Some respected my effort. Others saw me as a temporary nuisance waiting for me to fail. But failure wasn't an option, not because I was fearless, but because I owed Grandpa more than that. I started carrying my sketchbook to meetings, jotting down ideas during breaks. One day I showed a rough design for a new company logo to Ms. Rivera, who loved it. "You've got an eye," she said. "Use it." That small validation fueled me a reminder that my art, my voice had a place in this world. By the end of my 3rd month, I was exhausted but growing. The board gave me a tentative nod, extending my trial period. The arts program was rolling out in 2 cities, and I was planning a follow-up speech at a national conference. I wasn't a natural leader yet, but I was learning to fake it, to step into the role until it fit. My condo felt like home, now filled with sketches and books, a space where I could dream without apology. Mia threw a small housewarming party, just the 2 of us, and a bottle of cheap wine, and we toasted to new beginnings. "You're not just surviving," she said, her eyes shining. "You're thriving." But thriving didn't erase the ache. My family's rejection was a wound that wouldn't heal, a constant reminder of the love I'd never had. I missed them, not the people they were now, but the idea of them, the family I'd once hoped we could be. Late at night, I'd read Grandpa's letter, tracing his words, wondering if I was making him proud. I was rising, but the climb was lonely, and the higher I went, the more I felt the weight of what I'd lost. Still, I kept going. The national conference was a month away, a chance to cement my place in the company and the industry. I was nervous but determined, sketching out my speech, refining my vision. I didn't know it then, but that conference would be the turning point, not just for my career, but for my family, for the truth to come crashing down in a way none of us could ignore. I was about to step into a moment that would change everything, and I was ready, or as ready as I'd ever be. Have you ever found strength in a moment you thought would break you? What kept you pushing forward? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your spark. The national conference loomed like a mountain on my horizon, its shadow growing larger with each passing day. I'd been running Harper Industries for 4 months now, and though I'd carved out a fragile foothold, I was still an outsider in a world of polished executives and cutthroat ambition. The speech I'd given at the regional conference had been a spark, a moment where I glimpsed what I could become, but this was different. The National Innovation Summit was a stage for industry giants, a place where billion-dollar deals were whispered in hallways and reputations were made or broken in minutes. I was invited to speak as Harper Industries' new leader, a role I still felt like I was borrowing, not owning. But I couldn't back down. Grandpa's legacy and my own fragile confidence depended on me stepping into that spotlight and proving I belonged. My days were a blur of preparation. I worked with a speech coach Mr. Ellison recommended, a sharp-witted woman named Karen who taught me to project my voice and hold a room's attention. "You're not just selling ideas," she said, adjusting my posture during a practice session. "You're selling yourself. Make them believe in you." I rewrote my speech a dozen times, weaving in Grandpa's vision for innovation, with my own ideas, community-driven projects, sustainable tech, a new scholarship fund for young artists in his name. The scholarship was my heart's work, inspired by Mrs. Carter, my old art teacher, and the sketchbook Grandpa had given me. I wanted to give kids like me a chance to dream without being told their dreams were worthless. Mia, as always, was my rock. She'd sit on my condo's couch eating popcorn while I practiced clapping like a one-woman fan club when I nailed a line. "You're gonna kill it, Em," she said, her grin infectious. "Those suits won't know what hit 'em," but she saw the strain. To the bags under my eyes, the way my hands shook when I thought no one was looking. One night she dragged me to a karaoke bar, forcing me to sing off-key pop songs, until I was laughing so hard I forgot my fear. "You're not just a CEO," she said as we stumbled home, tipsy on cheap cocktails and friendship. "You're Emily, that's enough." Work was relentless. The board was warming to me, but only slightly. Ms. Rivera was my ally, pushing my arts program and defending me in meetings, but Mr. Thornton and his old guard cronies still watched me like hawks waiting for a misstep. I was making progress, though. The Housing Division's arts program was gaining traction, with local papers calling it a bold new direction for Harper Industries. I'd also launched a small redesign of the company's branding, incorporating my own sketches into a new logo. It was a risk some executives grumbled about amateur art, but when focus groups loved it, even Mr. Thornton had to admit it was a win. Each victory built my confidence brick by brick, but the pressure never let up. I was learning to swim in deep water, but the current was strong, and I was still afraid of drowning. My family's attacks hadn't stopped, though they'd shifted from outright hostility to a colder, more strategic assault. Claire sent me a formal letter through her lawyer, demanding a family meeting to discuss equitable distribution of Grandpa's estate. It was laughable. They'd never cared about equity when it came to me, but it stung a reminder of their refusal to see me as anything but a thief. My mother stopped calling, but I heard through Mia's cousin, who knew Lila, that she was telling friends I'd manipulated Grandpa in his final days. Mark and Lila kept up their social media campaign, posting photos of themselves at charity galas with captions about honoring family legacies. The hypocrisy made my blood boil, but I didn't engage. I had bigger fights to win. The conference was a week away when I got a call from Ms. Rivera. "Emily, there's something you need to know," she said, her voice tense. "Your cousin Mark has been reaching out to board members, claiming you're unfit to lead. He's pitching himself as a stabilizing force for the company." I felt like I'd been punched. Mark, who'd never worked a day at Harper Industries, who'd spent his trust fund on sports cars and vacations, thought he could waltz in and take what I'd been bleeding for. "He's got no leverage," Ms. Rivera assured me. "But he's stirring up noise. Your speech needs to shut it down. Show everyone you're the real deal." The news lit a fire in me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Grandpa's trust, for the company he'd built, for every kid like me who'd been told they weren't enough. I poured everything into my speech, staying up late to refine every word, sketching visuals, to pair with it a timeline of Harper Industries' impact, a mock-up of the scholarship program's logo. I practiced until my voice was hoarse, until I could deliver it without notes, until it felt like a piece of my soul. Karen, my coach, watched my final run-through and nodded. "That's it," she said. "That's the Emily they need to see." The day of the conference, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, but a strange calm in my chest. I wore a deep blue dress, simple but sharp, and tucked Grandpa's letter into my bag alongside my sketchbook. Mia drove me to the convention center, blasting my favorite song to hype me up. "You're a badass," she said, hugging me before I stepped out. Go show them. The venue was a hive of energy, thousands of attendees' screens flashing with corporate logos, voices buzzing with deals and dreams. I felt small, but I held my head high, channeling Mia's confidence, Grandpa's faith, Mrs. Carter's encouragement. Backstage, I met the other speakers' CEOs with decades of experience, their ease a stark contrast to my nerves. One, a tech mogul named Dr. Patel, shook my hand and said, I knew your grandfather. He was proud of you. His words hit me like a wave, and I blinked back, tears nodding. When my turn came, I walked onto the stage, the lights hot and bright, the crowd a blur of faces. I gripped the podium, took a breath, and began. My grandfather, William Harper, taught me that true innovation isn't about profit, it's about people. I said, my voice steady. He built Harper Industries to lift communities, to solve problems, to give dreamers a chance. I walked them through his legacy, then mine, the arts program, the scholarship fund, the rebrand. I showed my sketches on the screen, raw and real, and shared Grandpa's words. Dreams are only impossible until someone dares to chase them. I'm here to chase them, I said, for him, for you, for everyone who's ever been told they can't. The applause started before I finished swelling into a roar that shook me to my core. I saw Dr. Patel in the front row clapping and Ms. Rivera beaming. Even Mr. Thornton in the back gave a slow nod. I left the stage on a high, my heart pounding with joy, not fear. The crowd's response wasn't just approval, it was belief, the kind I'd craved my whole life. Backstage reporters swarmed, asking for quotes, snapping photos. A journalist from a major business outlet pulled me aside. That was inspiring, Ms. Harper, she said. We're running a feature on you, the new face of Harper Industries. Can we talk? I nodded, dazed, as she peppered me with questions about my vision, my journey, my plans. It was surreal, like watching someone else's life. The feature went live the next day, and my phone exploded. Mia sent me a screenshot with a string of heart eyes emojis. Mr. Ellison called, his voice warm with pride. You've done it, Emily. You've shown them who you are. The article was glowing, calling me a visionary, with heart and a bold new leader for a storied company. It wasn't just praise, it was a shield proof that I wasn't the failure my family claimed, but it also painted a target on my back. Mark's campaign against me fizzled. Ms. Rivera told me the board had dismissed him outright, but my family wasn't done. Claire texted me a single line, enjoy your moment. It won't last. The venom in her words was a reminder that they'd never stop, not until they'd taken everything I'd fought for. I didn't let it dim my light. The speech opened doors, invitations to panels, meetings with investors, even a call from a nonprofit wanting to partner on the scholarship fund. I threw myself into it, working harder than ever. I hired a small team to help with the arts program, including a young designer named Tara, who reminded me of myself at 20. Watching her light up when I praised her work felt like paying forward Mrs. Carter's kindness. I was building something not just for the company but for myself, a life where I wasn't defined by my family's rejection. But the loneliness lingered. Success didn't erase the ache of being unloved, of knowing my parents, my sister, my cousins saw me as an enemy. I'd catch myself staring at old family photos, wondering if there'd ever been a time when they cared. Grandpa's letter was my comfort, but even that couldn't fill the void. One night I called Mia, my voice breaking. Am I doing this right? I asked. I'm winning, but it feels empty. She was quiet for a moment, then said, You're not empty, Em. You're full of love, of fight, of everything your family can't take. Let that be enough for now. Her words stayed with me, a reminder to keep going, to trust that the emptiness would fade. The conference had been a triumph, but it was also a spark for what came next, a moment that would force my family to face me, not as the girl they'd dismissed, but as the woman I'd become. I didn't know it yet, but the stage was set for a reckoning, one that would shake us all to our roots. Have you ever had a moment where you proved yourself, not just to others, but to you? What did it feel like to stand in your own power? Share your stories below. I'd love to hear how you claimed your moment. The high from the National Innovation Summit carried me for weeks, like a wave I didn't want to crash. That speech, those clapping hands, the Business Journal feature calling me a visionary with heart. It was proof I wasn't the worthless girl my family had branded me at Grandpa's wake. I was Emily Harper, leader of Harper Industries. And for the first time, I believed it, not just in my head, but in my bones. But waves always break, and mine was about to hit a wall I hadn't seen coming. Success didn't erase the scars my family had left, and their silence after the conference wasn't peace, it was the quiet before a storm. I was rising, but the higher I climbed, the more I felt their eyes on me, waiting for me to fall. Work became my refuge. Harper Industries was a living thing, pulsing with projects and people, and I threw myself into it, determined to make Grandpa proud. The arts program was expanding with murals popping up in 3 more cities and workshops booked through the next year. I'd visit the sites when I could, watching kids paint their faces lit with the same joy I'd felt in Mrs. Carter's art room. It healed something in me. Those moments reminded me why I was fighting. The scholarship fund was taking shape too, named after Grandpa, the William Harper Dreamers Fund. We'd already selected our first recipients, 10 high schoolers who'd get full rides to college, no strings attached. When I read their essays, raw and hopeful, I cried, thinking of the girl I'd been sketching in a corner, while my family praised Claire. The board was starting to trust me. Ms. Rivera was my champion, pushing my ideas and mentoring me in private, teaching me how to navigate the old boys club. Even Mr. Thornton, the gruff chairman who doubted me from day one, softened, admitting at a meeting that my rebrand had boosted our stock price. "Keep it up, Miss Harper," he said, his tone still stern, but with a nod that felt like a medal. I was learning the language of power, when to push, when to listen, when to stand my ground. I wasn't perfect. I still stumbled in meetings, misread cues, or second-guessed myself late at night. But I was growing, and that was enough. Mia kept me grounded. She'd moved closer to downtown, just a few blocks from my condo, and we'd meet for coffee or late-night tacos talking about everything but work. She was dating a paramedic now, a sweet guy named Leo, and watching her blush when she talked about him made me laugh, easing the ache in my chest. "You need to get out there, Em," she'd tease, nudging me. "You're a catch-now billionaire boss lady." I'd roll my eyes, but the truth was I didn't have time for love, and I wasn't sure I trusted it. My family's betrayal had left me wary, afraid to let anyone too close. Mia saw it, though, and never pushed too hard. "You're enough on your own," she'd say, and I held on to that like a lifeline. But my family wasn't done with me. 5 months after the wake, they made their next move, and it wasn't subtle. I got a call from Mr. Ellison, his voice tight. "Emily, your sister and cousins have filed a lawsuit. They're contesting the will, claiming you unduly influenced your grandfather." My stomach dropped. A lawsuit, I'd expected, their anger, their schemes, but this was a new level of vicious. "They're saying you took advantage of his illness," Mr. Ellison continued, "and they're demanding the company be split among the family." I sat on my couch, staring at the city lights through my window, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath me. Undue influence, I'd sat by Grandpa's bed, sketching, listening to his stories, loving him, when they'd only shown up for his money. The accusation wasn't just a lie, it was a violation, a theft of the one pure thing I'd had. Mr. Ellison assured me the case was weak. "Your grandfather was sharp until the end," he said. "His will is ironclad, and we have witnesses to his intent." "But this will be messy, Emily. They're playing dirty." Messy was an understatement. The lawsuit hit the press, a tabloid-friendly headline, "Harper heiress accused of stealing family fortune." My phone buzzed with notifications, strangers on social media calling me a gold digger, a fraud. Claire gave an interview to a local news outlet, her tears perfectly staged, saying, "We just want what's fair for our family." Mark and Lila posted cryptic Instagram stories, hinting at justice and truth. My parents stayed silent, but their absence spoke louder than words. They were complicit, letting their golden children tear me apart. The public scrutiny was suffocating. I'd walk into meetings and catch executives, whispering, their eyes darting away when I looked. A reporter ambushed me outside the Harper Industries tower, shoving a microphone in my face. "Ms. Harper, did you manipulate your grandfather for his fortune?" I froze my heart, pounding before muttering, "No comment," and ducking inside. At home, I'd scroll through comments online, each one a knife. "She's a nobody. She'll ruin the company. Typical greedy millennial." I stopped sleeping, my dreams haunted by Claire's smirk. My mother's cold stare, Grandpa's voice fading. Doubt crept back louder now. Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't deserve this. Mia saw me spiraling and staged an intervention. She showed up with a stack of my old sketches, ones I'd done in high school, and spread them across my coffee table. "Look at these," she said, her voice fierce. "You were dreaming big when we were kids, Em. You didn't let your family stop you then, and you're not going to let them now." She pulled out Grandpa's letter, which I'd left out one night, and read it aloud. "You're my spark. Trust yourself." Her eyes locked on mine. "He didn't pick you because you're perfect. He picked you because you're you. Fight for that." I hugged her, tears soaking her shirt, and for the first time in days, I felt the fire flicker back. I met with Mr. Ellison and a legal team, mapping out our defense. We had evidence, hospital logs showing my visits, Grandpa's notes praising my heart and vision, even a video he'd recorded a year before his death, stating clearly that I was his choice. "Emily understands what this company is for," he said in the grainy footage, his voice weak but firm. Watching it, I cried, not just for him, but for the trust he'd placed in me. I wasn't fighting for money or power. I was fighting for his dream. For the kids in my arts program, for the girl I'd been told she was nothing. "Let's bury them," I told Mr. Ellison, my voice hard. He nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes. Work didn't stop. I pushed forward, launching the scholarship fund publicly with a small ceremony at a community center. The recipients were their 10 nervous teens, clutching acceptance letters, their parents beaming. I gave a short speech, my voice cracking, as I talked about Grandpa's belief in dreamers. One girl, Sophia, hugged me after whispering, "Thank you for seeing us." It was a moment of light in the darkness, a reminder of why I couldn't give up. The press covered it too, a rare positive story that drowned out some of the lawsuit noise. Harper heiress honors legacy with generosity. One headline read, and I saved it a small victory. But the lawsuit wasn't the only threat. Mark had been meeting with a rival company, whispering about a hostile takeover if the board lost faith in me. Miss Rivera tipped me off, her voice low over coffee. "He's desperate," she said, "but he's not stupid. You need to lock in the board's support, Emily. Show them you're untouchable." I nodded, my mind racing. The next board meeting was in 2 weeks, a chance to present my 6-month plan, a bold push for green tech and community investment. I worked late sketching charts, crunching numbers with a consultant, pouring my heart into it. If I could win the board, Mark's schemes would collapse. I also started therapy, something Mia had been nudging me toward. Dr. Lynn was a quiet woman with sharp insights, and in our sessions, I unpacked the weight of my family's rejection. "You've been carrying their judgment like it's truth," she said one day. "What if you let it go?" It was a simple question, but it cracked something open. I wasn't worthless, I never had been. My family's cruelty was their failure, not mine. Therapy didn't fix everything, but it gave me tools, a way to breathe through the pain, instead of drowning in it. As the board meeting approached, I felt a shift. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was claiming my place. I walked into the Harper Industries tower with my head high, my sketchbook under my arm, my speech for the board memorized. I was still scared, still raw, but I was ready. The lawsuit, the press, my family's schemes, they were noise, not truth. Grandpa had seen me, and I was finally starting to see myself. The meeting was a turning point. I presented my plan, my voice steady. My slides filled with my own designs. I talked about profit, yes, but also purpose, how Harper Industries could lead with heart. Miss Rivera smiled. Mr. Thornton leaned forward, engaged. When I finished, the room applauded, not politely but genuinely. "You've got my vote," Ms. Rivera said later, and others echoed her. Mark's takeover bid was dead in the water, and the board's trust was mine. That night, I stood on my condo's balcony, the city glittering below. I held Grandpa's letter, tracing his words. I wasn't done fighting, the lawsuit was ongoing. My family still lurking, but I was stronger now, rooted in something deeper than their hate. I was Emily Harper, and I was enough. Have you ever had to fight for your worth against people who should have loved you? How did you find your strength? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear how you rose. The board meeting had been my Rubicon, a line crossed that I couldn't uncross. For 6 months, I'd been clawing my way up, proving to the board, the press, and myself that I could lead Harper Industries. That presentation, with its blend of Grandpa's vision and my own designs, had locked in the board's trust and buried Mark's takeover scheme. I walked out of the tower that day, feeling like I'd shed a skin, leaving behind the girl who'd trembled at her grandfather's wake. But victory didn't erase the war. My family's lawsuit was still alive, a venomous thing twisting through the courts, and their silence since the board meeting wasn't surrender, it was strategy. I knew they were waiting, watching for a crack to exploit. What I didn't expect was that the crack would come not in a courtroom, but in a room full of strangers, where the truth would explode in a way that left us all exposed. The moment arrived at the Harper Industries annual gala, a glittering event held every year to celebrate the company's achievements and court investors. I'd been dreading it for weeks. Public speaking was one thing. Mingling with hundreds of elite guests, senators, CEOs, philanthropists was another. But Ms. Rivera insisted it was non-negotiable. "This is your coronation, Emily," she said over coffee. Her eyes serious. "You've won the board. Now win the world." I nodded, swallowing my fear, and threw myself into preparing. I worked with Karen, my speech coach, on a keynote address, a 10-minute talk about the company's future. I picked a dress emerald green, bold but elegant, and practiced my smile in the mirror, trying to look like I belonged in a room where I'd once felt like an imposter. Mia was my hype squad as always. She came over the night before helping me curl my hair and blasting music to calm my nerves. "You're not just Emily anymore," she said, pinning a stray lock into place. "You're the Emily Harper. They're lucky to be in your orbit." I laughed, but her words stuck. I wasn't the same person who'd stood in the corner at Grandpa's wake, clutching a sketchbook while my family sneered. I'd built something: arts programs, scholarships, a vision, and I was ready to own it, even if my hands still shook when I thought about the gala. The event was held at the city's grandest hotel, a palace of marble and chandeliers. I arrived early, my heart pounding as I stepped into the ballroom. It was a sea of wealth women in gowns that cost more than my old apartment men, in tuxedos sipping champagne, their laughter sharp and confident. I smoothed my dress, clutching my note cards, and scanned the room. Miss Rivera was there, giving me a nod. Mr. Ellison stood by the bar, chatting with investors. Even Mr. Thornton, the board's grumpiest member, was present. His rare smile, a sign of how far I'd come. I took a breath, ready to mingle, when I saw them, Claire, Mark, Lila, and my parents standing together near the stage, their faces a mix of smugness and calculation. My stomach lurched. They hadn't been invited, at least not by me. But Harper Industries was a public company, and the gala was an open event for stakeholders. They must have used their connections, or maybe just their last name, to get in. Claire caught my eye, her smile cold and sharp, like a blade glinting in the light. Mark whispered something to Lila, who laughed, her gaze flicking to me. My parents stood apart, my mother's face a mask of disapproval, my father's eyes hard. I froze, the room tilting, their presence a violation of the space I'd fought to claim. Why were they here? To intimidate me? To sabotage me, I didn't know, but I couldn't let them see me falter. Ms. Rivera appeared at my side, her voice low. "Ignore them, Emily. This is your night." I nodded, forcing a smile, and plunged into the crowd, shaking hands, making small talk, channeling every ounce of courage I'd built. I talked about the arts program, the scholarship fund, the green tech push, and people listened, really listened. A senator praised my fresh perspective. A tech CEO asked for my card. I was holding my own, even with my family's eyes burning into me from across the room. But the tension was a wire tightening with every glance I stole in their direction. The keynote was scheduled for 9 p.m., the night's centerpiece. As the hour approached, I slipped backstage to review my notes, my hands trembling. Karen's voice echoed in my head, "Make them believe in you." I pictured Grandpa, his crinkly smile, his letters' words. "You're my spark." I was ready, or as ready as I'd ever be. But as I stepped toward the stage, I overheard a conversation that stopped me cold. It was Claire talking to a man I recognized as a rival company's VP, her voice low but clear. "She's a fraud," she said. "She's got no experience, no right to lead. We're fighting the will and we'll win. You just need to back us." The VP murmured something I couldn't hear, but Claire's laugh was sharp, triumphant. Rage surged through me, hot and bright. They weren't just here to watch. They were here to tear me down, to undermine me in front of the industry. I wanted to storm over, to scream, to expose them. But I didn't. I took a breath, channeling the anger into something harder, sharper resolve. They wanted a fight, I'd give them one, not with shouts, but with the truth on my terms. I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warmed the crowd hushing. I looked out, seeing Claire's smirk, Mark's crossed arms, my parents' cold stares. And I began. My grandfather, William Harper, built this company on a simple idea that business can change lives. I said, my voice clear, carrying over the room. He believed in dreamers, in people who dared to see the world differently. He believed in me. I paused, letting the words settle, my eyes locking on my family. Not everyone did. Some called me unworthy, unfit, a mistake. But I'm here standing in his shoes because he saw what others couldn't, a heart that fights a mind, that creates a will that doesn't break. The crowd was silent, hanging on my words. I shared the company's wins, record profits, the arts program's impact, the scholarship fund's first graduates. I showed my sketches on the screen, raw and real, tying them to Grandpa's vision. "This is who we are," I said. "A company that builds, that dreams, that lifts. I'm proud to lead it, and I'm just getting started." The applause was thunderous, shaking the room, and I saw Ms. Rivera beaming, Mr. Ellison, clapping even Mr. Thornton on his feet. But my eyes were on my family, their faces pale, their confidence crumbling. Then came the twist. As the applause faded, Mr. Ellison stepped onto the stage, unscripted, his face grave. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I have an announcement. Some of you may have heard rumors about a legal challenge to William Harper's will. Tonight, I'm putting those to rest." He held up a document, its seals glinting under the lights. "This is William's final testament, verified by multiple witnesses, naming Emily Harper as sole heir to Harper Industries. Any claims of undue influence have been thoroughly debunked, and the courts have upheld his wishes." He turned to me, his voice softening. "Emily, your grandfather would be proud." The room erupted again, cheers and gasps mixing. I stood, frozen, tears pricking my eyes as the weight of his words hit me. It was over, the lawsuit, the lies, the doubt. I looked at my family, and their masks had shattered. Claire's mouth was open, her eyes wide with shock. Mark's fists were clenched, his face red. Lila looked like she might cry, and my parents stood motionless, their heads bowed, unable to meet my gaze. The crowd didn't know the full story, but they felt the moment, the justice of it, and their applause was for me, for Grandpa, for the truth. I left the stage, my legs shaking, and Ms. Rivera hugged me, whispering, "You did it." Backstage people swarmed, reporters, investors, board members, all wanting a piece of me. But my eyes kept drifting to my family who'd slipped toward the exit, their heads low. Claire turned at the last moment, her gaze meeting mine, and for the first time I saw something new in her eyes, not anger but shame. They left without a word, and I let them go, the door closing on a chapter I'd been fighting to end. Later, alone in my condo, I sat with Grandpa's letter, tracing his words. The gala had been my public triumph the moment I'd turned the tables, but it wasn't the end. My family's defeat didn't heal the hurt they'd caused, and the company was still a beast I was learning to tame. But I'd faced the world, and won. I wasn't worthless. I was Emily Harper, and I was enough. Have you ever had a moment where the truth set you free, even if it hurt? How did you find the courage to face it? Share your stories below. I'd love to hear how you claimed your victory. The gala's triumph lingered like a song. I couldn't stop humming its echoes, carrying me through the days that followed. I'd stood on that stage under the weight of my family's stares and claimed my place as Harper Industries' leader. Mr. Ellison's announcement the will upheld my family's lawsuit. Crushed had been a gavel strike, a public reckoning that left them exposed and me vindicated. The press ate it up with headlines like, "Harper Harris silences doubters," and "A new era for Harper Industries." Strangers on the street congratulated me, their smiles warm, as if my victory was theirs too. But as I sat in my condo that first night, the city glittering beyond my windows, I felt a quiet ache beneath the joy. I'd won, but at what cost? My family was gone. Not just defeated, but estranged, their absence a void I hadn't expected to feel so deeply. I held Grandpa's letter, its pages worn from my touch, and wondered what came next, not for the company but for me. The weeks after the gala were a whirlwind. Harper Industries was thriving, its stock climbing its projects, drawing global attention. The arts program was now in 10 cities with plans for international expansion. The William Harper Dreamers Fund had doubled its recipients, and I'd started visiting schools to meet the students, their wide-eyed gratitude fueling me. One girl, a painter named Aisha, gave me a canvas she'd made, a vibrant swirl of blues and golds inspired by my conference speech. I hung it in my office next to Grandpa's old hardware store sign, a reminder of where we'd both begun. The board was fully behind me, now even Mr. Thornton, who'd once doubted me, calling my leadership a pleasant surprise. Mrs. Rivera became my confidant, inviting me to her home for dinners, where we'd talk strategy over wine, her laughter easing the pressure. But the personal toll was heavy. My family's defeat didn't bring closure. It opened wounds I'd buried. I'd spent years craving their love, their approval, and though I'd learned to stand without it, the rejection still stung. Claire's shamed look as she left the gala haunted me, not because I pitied her, but because it marked the end of any hope for reconciliation. My parents hadn't reached out, not even to apologize, and Mark and Lila had gone silent, their social media accounts suddenly private. I heard through Mia's cousin that they'd moved to another state, licking their wounds. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied, to revel in their downfall, but I couldn't. They were my family, or they had been, and their absence left a hollow space no victory could fill. Therapy with Dr. Lynn helped me navigate it. "You're grieving," she said one session, her voice gentle. "Not just for them, but for the idea of what you wanted them to be." She was right. I'd spent my life chasing a family that didn't exist, one that would see me, love me without conditions. Letting go of that dream was like losing Grandpa all over again. But Dr. Lynn gave me a mantra: your worth doesn't depend on their validation. I repeated it daily, writing it in my sketchbook, letting it sink into my bones. I was enough not because I ran an empire, but because I was me, flaws and all. Mia was my anchor as always. She and Leo were getting serious, and she'd drag me to their game nights, forcing me to laugh and relax. "You're not allowed to be a brooding billionaire forever," she teased, tossing me a controller. Those nights surrounded by her warmth and Leo's terrible puns reminded me I wasn't alone. I started opening up too, not just to Mia, but to others. Tara, the young designer on my team, became a friend, joining me for coffee to talk art and ambition. Ms. Rivera introduced me to her niece, a journalist who wanted to profile the scholarship fund, and we hit it off, bonding over our love of old sci-fi novels. Slowly, I was building a new family, not of blood, but of choice. Work kept me grounded. I launched a new green tech division inspired by Grandpa's notes about sustainable innovation. It was a risk. Some investors grumbled about costs, but when a major university partnered with us, the doubters quieted. I also started a personal project, a community center in Grandpa's hometown, with art studios, tech labs, and a library. I designed the logo myself, a stylized star from one of my old sketches. And when the groundbreaking ceremony aired on local news, I saw Sophia, one of my scholarship recipients, in the crowd cheering. It was a full-circle moment, proof that I was building something real. But the past wasn't done with me. A month after the gala, I got a letter not from my family, but from my mother's old friend, Mrs. Langston, a family acquaintance I hadn't seen in years. It was handwritten, her script, shaky but warm, and it changed everything. Dear Emily, it began. I've watched your journey with pride, but there's something you need to know. Your grandfather left a second letter, one he asked me to give you when the time was right. My heart stopped. A second letter. I drove to her house that day, a modest bungalow on the city's edge, my hands trembling as she handed me a sealed envelope, my name in Grandpa's familiar scrawl. Inside was a single page, dated a month before his death. My dearest Emily, it read, if you're reading this, you've faced the storm and come out stronger. I knew you would. But there's one more thing I ask. Don't let anger define you. Your family hurt you, and I'm sorry I couldn't shield you from that. But their loss not evil. Forgive them not for their sake, but for yours. Live free, my spark. I love you always. I sat in Mrs. Langston's living room, tears streaming as she patted my hand. He was so proud of you, she said. He wanted you to have peace. Forgiveness felt impossible. How do you forgive people who called you worthless, who sued you, who turned your grief into a battlefield? I spent days wrestling with it, reading the letter until I knew it by heart. Dr. Lin helped me unpack it, asking, what does forgiveness mean to you? Does it mean letting them back in, or letting yourself go? Her question shifted something. Forgiveness wasn't about them, it was about me. About releasing the weight I'd carried for so long. I didn't have to love them or even see them, but I could stop letting their cruelty shape me. I didn't reach out to my family. They'd made their choices, and I wasn't ready to bridge that gap. But I wrote a letter of my own, not to them but to myself, a promise to live free, as Grandpa had asked. I tucked it into my sketchbook next to his, and felt lighter, like I'd set down a burden I hadn't known I was carrying. I started sketching again, not for work, but for joy. Wild, colorful pieces that filled my condo with life. One a portrait of Grandpa's porch under a starry sky. I framed and hung above my desk, a symbol of the peace I was finding. A year after the gala, I stood at the community center's opening, the star logo gleaming on the building's facade. The crowd was huge, locals, students, reporters, even Dr. Patel, the tech mogul who'd known Grandpa. I gave a short speech, my voice steady, no note cards needed. This is for dreamers, I said, for everyone who's been told they're not enough. You are. Keep dreaming. The applause was warm, but it was the kids' faces, Sophia, Aisha, the others, that stayed with me. They were my why, my reason to keep going. After I walked through the center's art studio, touching the easels, smelling the paint, Tara was there, setting up for the first workshop, and she hugged me, her eyes shining. You did this, Emily, she said. I shook my head, smiling. We did this. That night, alone in my condo, I looked at Grandpa's letter, then at Aisha's painting, at my own sketches, at the life I'd built. I wasn't done. There were more projects, more fights, more dreams to chase. But I was whole, not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen myself. I don't know if I'll ever see my family again. Maybe one day Claire will call, or my parents will show up seeking forgiveness, or something else. I don't know if I'll be ready or if I'll want to be. But I know this, my worth doesn't depend on their validation or anyone's. It's in the lines I draw, the lives I touch, the spark I carry. Grandpa saw it, and now I see it too. I'm Emily Harper, and I'm enough. Have you ever found peace by letting go of someone else's judgment? What did it take to choose yourself? Share your stories below. I'd love to hear how you found your light.